Hi, welcome to Inside Kate's Kitchen. I'm Kate. Today we're going to be doing something a little different. We're going to be canning pinto beans, but we're going to be using the no-soak method, which means you don't have to do a lot of prep work in advance. We are going to, however, be doing them in the pressure cooker, so that takes a few extra steps. I have 2 pounds of beans, and I put 1/2 cup of beans in each of these jars, and I'm going to do the last 3 jars just so that you can see how we do it. We put our canning measure in, make sure it's even, and dump it in. If you were doing quart jars, you would put a whole cup. Now, we have a little bit of extra in here, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little more in each of these jars. I don't have enough to make another whole jar. So there we are. Now, if we wanted to, we could simply put hot water and salt in this, put the lids on and process it, and have pinto beans on our pantry shelf. But I want to do a little bit extra today because I like to flavor my beans. I don't like just plain beans. So one of the things we're going to do is ranch style beans. And that's what we're going to start with. Okay, the first thing you do is get the lid off. This is salt, and it's 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. Well, the smallest spoon measure I have is 1/4, so we just hope that that's almost half. Actually, probably a little less than half of it, which is better for you. Most people don't like that much salt anyway. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is chili powder. Chili powder is the same as salt, 1/8 of a spoon, a teaspoon. I don't know if you can see that well or not, but that's a little less than 1/2 of a 1/4 teaspoon, which makes it an 1/8. Feel free, if you want, when we're doing this on your own, to add as much extra as you like. Of any of the spices, for that matter, you can put up to 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt in there and not really make it too salty. So, everybody has their own likes and dislikes. The next thing is cumin. Cumin is a spice that some people like and some people really hate. I like it, my family likes it, so we're going to use it. And we're going to put about 1/8 of a teaspoon because cumin is pretty good. Here we go again. I thought when I was preparing for this video that I would get all of the measurements, figure out how many jars I had, put all the spices together, and then shake them up real good, and then put them in one time into the jars. But I realized if I did that, there was no way to be sure that each jar got the same amount. So, and I'm trying to make it consistent on my shelf. So when we go for a can of ranch style beans, we know that's what we're getting. So I decided 1 by 1 is better. Next is garlic powder. Now, I have granulated garlic. I prefer it over garlic powder because it just tastes better to me, for one thing. And this is powdered, granulated garlic I did on my own. I made this myself. This is also the same amount, the 1/8 of a teaspoon again. There we go. Now, next up is celery. I dry or dehydrate my own celery. Then I put it in a coffee grinder and grind it up. So I have basically kind of granular celery or coarsely chopped celery. Now let's see. Celery is 1/4 of a teaspoon, so we get to not be so careful on the measurements this time. Add just a little more. Okay. And onion powder is the same. The 1/8 teaspoon is really pretty easy to do since everything's almost the same. Just got kind of used to seeing what half of it looks like, and that's what you go with. Now, one thing that I'm going to add that the recipe does not necessarily call for, and that is tomato powder. I like my beans with a tomato flavored juice in them. I also dehydrate my own tomatoes and make my own tomato powder. And basically what I do when I'm canning tomatoes is I save the skins. Most people, when they peel the skins off, they just throw them away. I don't. I save them and put them on the dehydrator trays and dehydrate them. Once they're dry, I put them in my little coffee grinder and grind them up into powder. And then I've got tomato powder on the shelves at all times. Tomato powder is great in soups, it's great in stews and chilies. Anything that you have a good tomato flavor or want a richer one, this is what you would use. Now on this, I'm going to put a 1/2 teaspoon in each. Okay. Now, some of the ways that you can change these up and fix them up is you can add, say, ham. We've got some ham we want to put in there, so we chop it into little pieces, and I just happen to have some leftover ham. We put just a few pieces in each one. It'll give it a great flavor, and it won't overcome anything, and it won't cause a problem with the water absorbing into the beans, because remember, we are using dry beans here. So we'll put some ham in these. And this is just enough for a side dish for a couple of people. We're not making a big meal out of these beans. However, if you wanted a meal, you could dump more than one jar. Another thing you can do is you can use, instead of using dehydrated, I like to use it out of my pantry to keep things going, but if you don't dehydrate, you can use fresh onions and fresh celery and things like that. It's just as good. I just, like I said, like to use the dry. Now we've got all of our things in here, and I've kept some hot water on the stove going. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to fill our jars with water up to the 1-inch headspace. Now remember, as this cooks in the dehydrator, those beans are going to absorb the water. Not all of it, hopefully. There should be some juice, but most of it. You fill it up right to the first ring here. The nice thing about doing these flavored is if you, say you come home at the end of the day and you want a small snack, or you're ready for something to eat but not a big meal yet, you can open one of these, heat it up, and you've got a meal there. All right, paper towel. We've got our jars filled. The next thing we're going to do is debubble. With this little tool came in the canning kit I got at Walmart. It has graduated steps here so you can check to be sure your headspace is right. This end I use for debubbling. You don't ever want to use metal when you're debubbling. You don't want to score the inside of your jars, especially if they're going in a pressure canner. Anything like that can cause problems when your pressure canner and can cause your jars to break. And you don't want that. You don't want the mess either. So you always debubble with something plastic. Now, it looks like my headspace has come down just a little bit. So let me get my funnel and we'll catch that back up. Doesn't take much, just a few drops, but you want to be sure you have the right amount so that the water doesn't wick into the canner rather. Okay. Next thing we do is we take a clean paper towel. We moisten it in some vinegar that I happen to have sitting over here in a bowl. And you wipe the rims and the rings of each jar. You want to do this to be certain that you have any salt or spices or meat juices or anything like that on there, because if you have it on there and you don't wipe it off, it could interfere with the seal. I have some lids here that don't want to let go. There we go. Next, you place your lids on the jars. And finally, your rims. Now, those of us who can a lot end up with a whole lot of rings, because you get them when you buy the jars, and you can use them over and over and over again, so you end up with a whole lot of these things. So I just bent a clothes hanger, made myself a U, and now I can put these on. And when you put your rims on here, your rings on here, you just want to do it fingertip tight. When that turns like that, that's tight enough. So let's do it again. Get it on there. There we go. See, it's turning. And lastly, we do it one more time with this one. Then I close this back up and I hang it over the knob on the cabinet. Now, the next thing we're going to do, I've had my canner sitting over here on low. It's not hot and boiling, it's just on low, because we don't want to put hot jars in cold water. So, for now, we're going to take these and set them in the canner. And I will continue to do the rest of the jars and put them in the canner. And when I get the canner loaded up, I will bring you back. Now, one thing I will tell you before I go is we have 18 jars. That's what 2 pounds of beans fills. It's 18 pint jars. I have on the bottom of the canner the rack. I am going to double stack in the canner this time. So I have a second rack. After we get 9 jars down in there, this will sit down on top of the jars, and we'll add the next 9. Then we'll close the lid, and before we close the lid, I'll bring you back and show you how that looks. See you in a few minutes. And we're back. That is a full canner. There are 18 pints. There are 2 levels. I put the bottom rack on, 9 cans. The second rack, 9 more cans. They're all ready to go. Now we need to talk about pressure canner safety. Pressure canning is as safe as you want to make it. If you follow the rules, chances are it's going to be extremely safe. The first thing you want to remember to do is always check your lid. You have a vent pipe here. You need to hold it up and look through it and be sure that you can see light, because that's the way you know your vent pipe is clear. Now, on my canner, it does not have a plastic or rubber band that goes inside here like so many canners do. If you have one of those, you need to check it each time to be sure it's pliable and soft without being loose and stretched out. Now on mine, it's a metal to metal connection, and what you have to do is you have to go in and put a little bit of oil, and I use coconut oil. You can also use vegetable oil, but some kind of an oil, so that when you're ready to take the lid back off the canner, it's ready to go. You can slide it off. Doesn't take much, just takes a little bit. And there we are. Now, on my canner lid, there is an arrow etched in the lid. That arrow lines up with a little cutout right here on the top. That way I'm sure that all of the hooks that go underneath and all of the little locks here will be in place. So we come around We line the arrow up with the cutout. Oops, let's try that over. There we go, with the cutout. Then once it's seated, we turn it so that these all line up. The arrows with that, and the next thing we do is we start on opposite sides and tighten these little connectors down. This is another safety feature. It keeps your lid on and keeps that pressure inside. On several of these, you have right by the little lock, you have a piece of metal that's screwed to the lid, and it comes down and hooks underneath where the lock is attached. That's another safety feature. When you put these on, you want to do them on opposite sides to be sure that you're getting a good tight seal and that it's level. So we've gotten all three sets. Well, this one's, I didn't get it loose enough before I got ready to put it on. Here we go. All three sets are going to be tight. There we go. They're good and tight all the way around. Now, as I told you, I've been leaving this set on low to keep the water warm. Now is the time we're going to turn it up to medium-high or high. On mine, I put it just below the 10, and we're going to let the water that's in here start to boil. When it boils, it will produce steam that will then chase all the cold air out through our little vent pipe here. As soon as I notice that that's going, I will set my timer for 10 minutes. After it has processed and steamed for 10 minutes, I'll put my weight on it. Now this is a weighted gauge canner. You have a gauge here that lets you know what the pressure is inside. You also have a weight that you set down over here to maintain that pressure so that you know that it's always whatever the pressure says in here. Your pressure is by the your altitude where you live. I happen to live just barely above sea level, so I am going to use 10 pounds of pressure when I put it on there. These beans will can for 75 minutes because beans and meat can at the same length of time, and we're doing it in pint jars, which is 75. If it were quarts, it would be 90. Now all we have to do is wait for it to vent, turn the timer on after it's vented for 10 minutes, and wait for 75. I'll bring you back when the canning is done. We're back. As you can see, I've already pulled out the first layer. 9 beautiful jars of beans just waiting. I got this first rack out, and now we're going to pull the rest out. Don't they look lovely? I'm so excited and can't wait to taste them. Now, the timing went like this. The steam vented for 10 minutes by the clock. Then I put the weight on. I let it cook for 75 minutes. At the end of the 75 minutes, we turned off the heat and allowed the canner to come down to normal pressure by itself. Didn't open any valves, didn't do anything, just left it alone. And it took approximately 45 to 50 minutes to do that. It's important for you to know that you have to let this thing come down from pressure naturally, because if you open it up, try and put cold water on the outside or anything like that to speed up the cooling process, you're going to break your jars, you're going to ruin your food, and you may also ruin your canner. So it's very important to simply let it go naturally. Then when your jars are finished, when your food is cooked and the canners come back down to pressure naturally, you take the weight off, you undo the locks, these, you loosen the can and lift it up away from you, set it out of the way. Then you use your jar lifter and you take your jars out one at a time, being very, very careful. Don't bang it on things. Put them on a towel in a draft-free area and let them cool overnight. Once they're cool tomorrow morning, I'll take the rings off each one, wash the jars off on the outside, put labels on them saying what they are. I put the name, in this case it'll be ranch-style beans, and the date we made it. Then they're ready to go on the shelves. Now, I'm really glad y'all were able to join me tonight. I've got a lot more videos planned and coming up in the future. If you want to be notified when I've made a new one, don't forget to subscribe. Give us a like so that YouTube will know that you enjoyed our videos. And we'll see you next time. Bye. Take care.